신사숙녀 여러분, 안녕하세요. 안보정책연구소 심포지엄에 오신 것을 환영합니다.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 2021 CSPS-Korea Symposium.
저희는 오늘 MC를 맡게 된 조지 메이슨 대학교 재학생 라인 페치와 오수아입니다.
Hello, I am Sua Oh, majoring in Global Affairs, and this is Ryan Page, majoring in International Politics. And we will be the MCs for today's event.
이번 심포지엄은 인간안보의 회색지대, 탈북민과 제3국 출생 아이들이라는 주제로 진행됩니다.
This year's symposium will be touching upon the topic of human security in the gray zone, North Korean defectors and their children.
This symposium is hosted by George Mason University, Korea, and co-organized by the Center for Security Policy Studies, Korea, and the Human Rights in North Korea. We would like to convey our gratitude to our sponsors, the International Republican Institute, the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Save the Children, 통하나, and the Incheon Free Economic Zone.
먼저 본 행사는 한국 조지 메이슨 대학교 주관으로 진행되며 안보정책연구소 CSPS-Korea와 사단법인 Think에서 공동 주최되는 행사입니다. 본 행사를 후원해 주신 IRI 국제공화연구소, UNOHCHR, UN 인권사무소, Save the Children, 통하나, 인천경제자유구역청 관계자분들께 감사의 말씀을 드립니다.
Before we begin, we would like to introduce some GMUK leadership and special guests who have joined us this evening. Please stand when your name is called.
오늘 이 자리를 빛내주신 한국 조지 메이슨 대학교 학장님들과 주요 인사 몇 분을 소개해드립니다. 이름이 호명되면 자리에서 일어나 주시길 바랍니다.
Firstly, we have Dr. Robert Matz, the campus dean of George Mason University, Korea.
한국 조지 메이슨 대학교 캠퍼스 대표이신 로버트 매츠 박사님.
Next is Ms. Kelley Chung, the Associate Dean of Admissions and Enrollment at George Mason University, Korea.
한국 조지 메이슨 대학교 입학처장님이신 정은주 처장님.
Next, we have Mr. Han Young-yeol, Director General of the IGC Foundation.
IGC 재단 사무총장이신 한영열 총장님.
Next is Mr. Yorgun Marcel, Associate Dean of Student Affairs at GMU, Korea.
한국 조지 메이슨 대학교 학생처장님이신 요르건 마셀 처장님.
Next, we have Dr. Gregory Hill, the Chief Administrative Officer at the University of Utah Asia Campus.
유타 대학교 아시아 캠퍼스의 캠퍼스 대표이신 그레그 힐 박사님.
Next, we have Ms. Oh Jung-min, the President of the International Republican Institute.
IRI 국제공화연구소 대표이신 오정민 대표님.
And finally, attending via Zoom, we have Dr. Shannon Davis, Associate Dean of Academic Affairs at GMU, Korea.
마지막으로 줌으로 참여하시는 한국 조지 메이슨 대학교 교학처장님이신 샤논 데이비스 박사님께 감사의 말씀을 드립니다.
Now, we would like to start the symposium with an opening address by Dr. Robert Matz, the Campus Dean of George Mason University, Korea.
이제 한국 조지 메이슨 대학교의 캠퍼스 대표이신 로버트 매츠 박사께서 개회사로 심포지엄의 공식적인 개회를 알려주시겠습니다. 큰 박수로 맞아주시기 바랍니다.
Good morning. 안녕하세요. It is my pleasure and honor to welcome you to the symposium hosted by the Human Rights in North Korea and by the Center for Security Policy Studies, Korea. The CSPS-K is a branch of the Center for Security Policy Studies on George Mason's Fairfax campus. The CSPS is a multidisciplinary research center whose members include experts in economics, history, political science, sociology, and distinguished practitioners in residence. The CSPS-K is similarly multidisciplinary. With a focus on international security, the CSPS leverages its Arlington, Virginia location, just across from the Potomac River from Washington, D.C., to draw on that city's large numbers of NGOs, defense and security officials, government officials, and senior military officers. The CSPS-K, similarly situated near Seoul, and the similar access this capital city offers to officials and experts in the defense, security, and policy realms. Most of all, the connection between these two centers recognizes the value, indeed the necessity, of dialogue on international security that crosses national boundaries. The connection also contributes to the central mission of George Mason Korea to provide a platform for such transnational dialogues across a range of topics. The topic of this year's symposium provides an important example of the necessity of this transnational approach. Nations alone cannot address the security of people put at risk by crossing national boundaries. International cooperation is required. This topic also demonstrates the importance of the CSPS and the CSPS-K's expanded notion of human security, which cannot be limited to national security. People within a nation who do not enjoy basic human rights are not secure. We are fortunate today to hear firsthand accounts of this issue from North Korean defectors and their children, from the people who work with them, and from distinguished experts. I am pleased to welcome them to the Incheon Global Campus and to Mason Korea, and I hope that these conversations today will continue to bear fruitful results around these issues. Finally, I want to thank the organizers of this conference, Professor Soyoung Kwon and her team at the Center for Security Policy Studies Korea, and the organization, the Human Rights in North Korea, along with the sponsors of this conference. We appreciate all that you have done to make this happen and look forward to a day of shared experiences, ideas, and conversations. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean Matz. We have received a congratulatory message from the director of the Center of Security Policy Studies, Ms. Ellen Laipson, who is a professor at Schar School of Policy and Government at George Mason University in Arlington. Here today is Mr. George Hutchinson, a fellow at CSPS Arlington, who will be delivering the message on behalf of Professor Laipson.
본교 알링턴 캠퍼스 안보정책연구소 앨런 레입슨 소장님께서 축사를 서면으로 보내주셨습니다. 본교 연구소의 펠로우신 조지 허친슨 연구원께서 대독하시겠습니다.
On behalf of Dean Mark Roselle of the Schar School of Policy and Government, I want to welcome you to this exciting symposium. We are grateful to Professor Soyoung Kwon for her able leadership of the Center for Security Policy Studies in Korea, and will be eager to share the results of your meeting with the George Mason community in the United States. Just this past week, President Biden welcomed President Moon Jae-in to the White House, and the two leaders discussed the importance of coordinating policies on North Korea, as well as the close political and cultural bonds between our two countries. The topic of your symposium, human security, is of special importance for peace and security on the Korean Peninsula. We look forward to learning about the insights of your symposium and wish you a productive and enriching meeting. Professor Ellen Laipson, Director, Center for Security Policy Studies, Schar School of Policy and Government, George Mason University.
Thank you. Now we would like to invite Ms. Kelley Chung, the Associate Dean of Admissions and Enrollment at George Mason University, Korea, to give a welcoming remark.
다음은 한국 조지 메이슨 대학교의 정은주 입학처장님께서 환영사를 해주시겠습니다. 박수로 맞이하여 주시기 바랍니다.
Good morning. Welcome to George Mason University, Korea, and welcome to Incheon Global Campus. I just want to share with you that this symposium has a very special and personal meaning to not only myself, but to my family. Growing up as a Korean American in sunny Southern California, on every June 25th, I remember listening to my father's heartaches of his divided country, Korea. All these years, I will admit, I have failed to share my father's heartaches, nor made a sincere attempt to fully understand my father's country's painful division. My indifference took a turn after returning back to my father's country after 40 years of living in the US. I witnessed with my own eyes and heard it with my own ears of what my father has been speaking to me for the last 40 years of my life. We are 한민족, or one people. I am honored that George Mason University Korea's Center for Security Policy Study is hosting this year's annual symposium on the very topic of human security of our people, Koreans. As my father has incessantly reminded me over and over again, regardless of which side of the 38th parallel, 38선, you were born, we are 한민족. This symposium has a significant meaning for Mason Korea because we are George Mason University, a university for the world. At this unprecedented time of pandemic, the world needs rising global leaders who envisions the Mason mission in creating more just, free, and prosperous world. I can say with the full confidence that this year's symposium's topic of human security will start the discussion among our Mason Korea students to lead and engage our community within and beyond the borders of Korea to bring awareness and much needed attention of human rights of our people, North Korean defectors, and their children born in the third world. I am hopeful that as we start the conversations and discussions here at Mason Korea's campus in Songdo, South Korea, and these critical sessions will also be shared all across the world. Mason Korea has once again achieved Mason's core identity, a university for the world. The legacy of this year's symposium will also carry on in my family as my father's heart's quest for his third-generation Korean American grandchildren to remember his belief in 한민족 with North Koreans. Now, with the advancement of technology, his grandchildren and their Korean American friends living in the suburb of California can now have an opportunity to join in and listen to the stories of their own people. Since moving back to Korea, I had numerous opportunities to meet and listen to the stories of North Korean defectors and their children born in the third country. In many ways, we are very different, but we share one commonality. In my language, we are Koreans, and in my father's language, we are 한민족. I hope that the discussions we started here today will continue until we, patriots, strive to create more just, free, and prosperous world. Go Patriots!
Thank you. Now we will have welcoming remarks from Mr. Thae Yong-ho, who is a member of the Korean National Assembly as well as a North Korean defector. He came to South Korea in 2016 and is now affiliated with the Foreign Affairs and Unification Committee. Unfortunately, he is not able to be present here today, but he will give his remarks with this video.
다음으로 태영호 국회의원님의 환영사가 있겠습니다. 태영호 의원님께서는 2016년 가족과 함께 탈북하셔서 한국으로 망명하셨으며 현재 대한민국 국회외교통일위원회 소속으로 활발한 활동을 하고 계십니다. 아쉽게도 의원님께서는 현장에 참석하지 못한 관계로 환영사는 영상으로 보시겠습니다.
안녕하십니까? 국회의원 태영호입니다. 조지 메이슨 대학이 주관하고 대학 산하 안보정책연구소와 띵크가 주최하는 연례 심포지엄 개최를 진심으로 축하드립니다. 현재 남북한은 북한 비핵화 달성과 교류 협력을 통한 평화체제 구축이라는 이러한 모순된 상황에 놓여 있습니다. 한편으로는 해결하기 위한 시간이 얼마 남지 않은 이산가족, 국군포로, 납북자 및 옥류자 문제에 정부가 보다 적극적으로 나서줄 것을 요구하는 사회적 목소리가 높아지고 있습니다. 이러한 시대적 분위기를 살펴볼 때 이번 심포지엄에서 다루는 인간안보의 회색지대, 탈북민과 제3국 출생 아이들, 이 문제는 매우 시적절한 문제라고 생각합니다. 남북한 분단의 역사는 한반도 구성원들의 삶에 지대한 영향을 미치고 있습니다. 분단 70년을 넘기는 동안 분단 1세대인 1천만 이산가족 대부분은 가족을 그리워하며 한을 품은 채 세상을 떠났습니다. 국군 포로, 납북자, 옥류자 문제도 해결할 길이 요원하기만 합니다. 1990년대 중반 이후 대량 아사를 피해 수십만의 북한 주민이 중국으로 식량을 구하러 국경을 넘었습니다. 한국에 입국한 북한 출신이 지금 3만 3천 명을 넘어섰습니다. 이 중 가족과 함께 입국한 경우도 있으나 대부분은 북쪽에 가족을 두고 온 새로운 이산가족들입니다. 기존의 이산가족과 신이산가족 문제의 공통점은 분단에 의한 구조적인 문제라는 것입니다. 개인의 잘못이 아님에도 일생을 걸쳐서 고통을 받고 있습니다. 이러한 구조적인 문제는 사회가 적극적으로 나서야 해결될 수 있음을 의미합니다. 한국은 헌법에 통일을 지향한다고 되어 있습니다. 과도기에 한국에 입국한 북한 이탈 주민의 정착과 보호를 위해 시행하고 있는 제도는 다른 선진국의 이민자를 위한 정책과 비교해도 손색이 없다, 이렇게 평가받을 수 있습니다. 그러나 아무리 제도가 충실히 갖춰졌다고 해도 새로운 곳에서 겪게 되는 문화적 차이와 차별은 여전히 개인이 극복해야 할 과제로 남아있게 됩니다. 우리 사회가 북한 이탈 주민을 더욱 따뜻하게 대하고 정착을 위해 보다 세심한 정책을 펼 수 있도록 한반도의 평화 통일에 긍정적으로 작용할 것입니다. 그러나 오늘 심포지엄 주제처럼 북한 이탈 주민 정책에 있어서 회색지대가 존재하고 있습니다. 탈북민이 중국 등 제3국에서 나온 아이들입니다. 탈북민 대부분은 중국 농촌의 가난한 남자와 결혼을 하게 됩니다. 중국은 북한의 요청에 의해서 탈북민들이 중국인과 결혼하여 아이까지 낳는 경우에도 북한에 송환해 왔습니다. 탈북민은 북한에 송환되면 처벌을 당할 수 있는 그런 난민의 지위에 있음에도 불구하고 비극은 지금도 계속 발생하고 있습니다. 탈북민이 북성을 피하고자 한국에 와서도 제3국 출생 아이들은 북한 출생 아이들과 비교해서 지원 정책 등에서 차별을 겪게 되는데요. 아이들이 겪는 고통, 이것은 개인의 문제가 아닌 분단에서 오는 구조적인 문제인 만큼 어른들이 나서서 이들을 돌봐야 할 책임이 있습니다. 이들의 출생의 특수성이 일생을 짓누르는 부정적 요인이 아닌 남북한과 대립을 잇는 교두보 역할을 하는 인재로 성장할 수 있도록 지원과 동료를 아끼지 말아야 할 것입니다. 오늘 심포지엄에서는 한반도 문제 전문가인 권 소영 안보정책연구소 소장님이 주제 발표, 전문가들의 톡 콘서트, 오전 전 유엔 대사이자 현 세이브 더 칠드런 이사장님, 이매 슈퍼가벨 유엔 인권사무소 소장 대행의 토론을 통해 제3국 출생 아이들 문제가 심도 있게 다뤄지기를 희망합니다. 우리 사회가 제3국 출생 탈북 아동 및 청소년에게 보다 많은 관심을 돌릴 수 있게 진심으로 기원하면서 다시 한번 심포지엄 개최를 축하드립니다. 감사합니다.
Thank you. Now we will have the concept note speech on today's topic by the Director of the Center for Security Policy Studies Korea, Dr. Soyoung Kwon.
다음은 안보정책연구소의 소장님이신 권소영 교수님께서 주제 발표를 해주시겠습니다. 박수로 맞아주시기 바랍니다.
Good morning. Every year, we select our security theme from different types of security issues and concerns. This year, we would like to talk about human security, focusing on the North Korean defectors and their children. The starting point of this year's event was one documentary we encountered. This film will be watched later, right following this session, and you will probably see why this was an important trigger to this symposium. The documentary is entitled Children Who Became the Phantoms. As a mother of two, the film really touched my heart. What caught my attention was not only the vulnerability of the women who defected from North Korea, but extension of their human security problems to their children. This film touched upon some essential questions about human security conceptualized by the UN Development Program and the International Conventions on Human Rights for Women and Children. I would like to talk about two concepts: human security in the gray zone. The symposium wants to shed a spotlight on the blind spot of human security. The North Korean defectors and their children are in need of belonging, safety, and identity. Without citizenship or refugee status, they cannot claim basic rights or get the protection needed. However, no one seems to be responsible for their security and deprivation. In this gray zone, the vicious cycle of violations of basic rights continue from one generation to another. The symposium hosts the North Korean defectors and their children here to place their problems and to seek solutions within the human security framework. Human security is an emerging paradigm for understanding global vulnerabilities. It is a people-centered and multidisciplinary understanding of security that focuses on individual, human dignity, protection, and empowerment of people. The UN introduces this concept in 1994 in their UNDP reports. It states, quote, "The concept of security has for too long been interpreted narrowly, related more to nation states than to people. Forgotten were the legitimate concerns of ordinary people who sought security in their daily lives. Human security is not a concern with weapons, it is a concern with human life and dignity," unquote. The realm of human security stretches from personal to community and to global levels. It concerns the issues of global inequality, human rights, and better living. However, being witnessed in the case of North Korean defectors and their children were the unethical practice of human trafficking, poverty, restricted freedom, and limited access to policy benefits in China, which all considered serious threat to their human security. So we would like to identify the problems here. We identify three groups who are victimized by the threats of human security. Firstly, North Korean women defectors. They crossed the border of China in search for human rights and freedom. Nonetheless, what they face after the escape are numerous threats of human security, namely human trafficking, sexual abuse, extreme poverty, which forced them to end up marrying Chinese men. They have to live with the constant fear of repatriation, since the Chinese government has been refusing to recognize a population either as refugees or migrants. Now, children who were born in China, they are confronting citizenship issues in China. They cannot apply for birth registration due to their mother's illegal status. Consequently, their access to education or medical treatment or other policies by the government were all denied. Born from a Chinese father and a mother who escaped from the North Korean regime, they are deprived of social inclusion and opportunities. Despite the risk of being killed or being arrested, mothers try to come to South Korea to raise their children in a better environment. When the mothers finally come to South Korea, they would eventually bring their children. However, their children will face numerous problems in South Korea again, including language barriers, difficulties in peer relationship, and setting up their career path, which calls for policy intervention and innovative programs. The second generation of North Korean defectors born in the third country, including China, takes up over 60% of the total population of young North Korean defectors in South Korea. And this number has been increasing since 2013. However, they are still left in the gray zone of human security as they are greatly marginalized due to their ambiguous identity. Also, they cannot be the beneficiaries of the policy of South Korea that are targeted at North Korean defectors, which include their educational college admission protocol or exemption from serving in the South Korean military. Also, they have a problem of protection. The North Korean defectors who left their home country in fear and for survival have been largely neglected from the protection of international community. Although there are the 1951 Refugee Convention, 1989 Convention on the Rights of the Child, or even the Sustainable Development Goals targeted at youth empowerment, there is a lack of policy support and international recognition of these people who are in the course of migration and resettlement. And this showcases apparent limitations of the aforementioned international conventions. A dialogue among stakeholders to identify problems faced by the North Korean defectors and their children is the first step. We need to alert the international community about this blind spot of their attention. This symposium is structured to address the following key questions in contemporary security studies. What is the referent object of security? Why is this an important issue? Whose security are we talking about? Security for whom? What is it that should be secured? And how can security be achieved? The first part of today's symposium, we will address the first two questions by looking at the essence of the problem. Discussing why this issue is important, it will touch upon two sub-themes: security for the defected North Korean women and security for their children. The afternoon session of the symposium will deal with the latter two questions in light of the international perspective on human security problems and the rights to a better life. This symposium wants to raise awareness on the issues and encourage relevant agencies to come up with innovative and hands-on solutions. The symposium also aims to inform and educate the North Korean defectors and their children about their basic rights to human security and the mechanism that can possibly protect them, This experience, in turn, can inspire the young defectors generation to be the next leader in advocating others in similar challenges. Most importantly, this afternoon's panel discussion will bring the problem under the international framework and to approach them from a human rights perspective by inviting the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights and former South Korean ambassador to the United Nations. This session is an attempt to find ways to improve the lives of those who are still in exodus to seek their basic rights they deserve as human beings. Ladies and gentlemen, this is just the beginning. We have to go beyond identifying and understanding the problem. What is needed here is not just empathy, but solutions. For this, we should continue to hold policy discussions and dialogue to help empowerment and capacity building of those who are still left in the gray zone of human security. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you.